We had a trial about a month ago. It was during the trial that we learned certain facts. These facts are this: the investigation that was initiated by then the Attorney General Luther Strange began on January the 8th. That was on a Sunday. By that Friday, on January the 13th, they had returned an indictment against me. Now, I was set to take office on January the 16th, and having been previously sworn in, upon taking office on January the 13th, I was suspended. And now we're where we are today.
So what were you actually charged with by this act of Luther Strange?
Well, I was charged with perjury first degree. Now, this perjury is making a false statement that is material to some type of proceeding. The false statement was alleged to have been made during the divorce trial. Now, this was not a trial that I was, it was not my divorce trial. It was a trial where I had been a previous guardian ad litem. I was called to testify under the presumption that my testimony was needed as the previous guardian ad litem. But obviously during the questioning, I was asked a question about an overnight stay at the mother's house, or the mother's apartment, that allegedly occurred a week prior to that. Of course, I answered no to the question. That was my answer. Speaking as a lawyer, from the information that I gathered, I think the jury was confused as to what I was really charged with. During the trial itself, the testimony elicited by the Attorney General's office went more into my qualifications and my abilities as a guardian ad litem. About 90% of the testimony was about whether I'm a good GAL or not, whether I had violated some of the rules of professional responsibility. When the jury went into deliberations, twice they came out and said they could not make a decision. And I think I had been told that the second time the jury foreman came out and again told the trial judge that they could not make the decision, it has been reported to me that the trial judge went into the room with them and gave them some instructions. Now, I'm not sure what those instructions were, but what I do know as a result of that, about 30 minutes later, they returned a guilty verdict.
And from receiving the guilty verdict, you were removed from your elected position?
I mean, based on state law, once I was convicted, by law, I am removed from office.
Is this case on appeal right now?
Well, it will be. There's a time frame that we have to go through. First of all, you have to go through sentencing, and that's set on January the 4th of next year. And then you've got a time frame within that, 30 days after sentencing, to file what we call post-conviction motions, where typically you ask for either the judge to take the verdict away from the jury and enter a verdict of acquittal, or ask for a new trial based on some new evidence, some irregularities during the trial, things of that nature. So you got a lengthy process that you go through. Then after those motions are heard, then you got another time period before the appeal actually has to be filed.
When you ran for district attorney, what were some of your ideas for the community?
Well, my platform is pretty clear, based on my experience not only as a law enforcement officer, but as an educator, a high school football coach, and as well as being a criminal defense lawyer for almost 15 years. And some of the other things I did as far as working with our veterans and widows of veterans to help get them their VA benefits. The one biggest problem I saw that has affected our state and really the country as a whole is the level of mass incarceration over the last 30 years. And what I realized is that corrections is not solving our problems. Incarceration is not solving our problems. We have got to be more proactive in identifying why people do the things they do. We got to be more proactive in getting treatment instead of incarceration for those with drug addictions and mental illness. We know that the federal judge in Montgomery has already ordered the Department of Corrections to put more money in mental health and for those who have mental disease in our correctional facilities. So we got to do more on this side. Several other things that I made it perfectly clear. Personally, I'm against the death penalty. Now, I also know that there may be certain circumstances that so are egregious that society would demand that we seek that. But just as a personal, my personal opinion is that I was against the death penalty.
Well, do you think that the charges made against you, including the procedures that took place during the time you were in court, are politically motivated?
Well, I can't speculate as to the motivation behind what happened to me. What I can do is give you a clear timeline. I was elected in November of 2016. I gave testimony in September of 2016, almost 2 months prior to that. If there was some problem with my testimony then, it was never made aware to me that there was anything wrong.
Once you were elected, that's when charges were made.
Well, once I was elected on November the 8th, what we know from the trial is this. I was scheduled to go in office on January the 16th of 2017. The Attorney General then, Luther Strange, initiated an investigation on January 8th, 8 days prior. On January the 13th, 3 days prior to me taking office, I was indicted. So I think the timeline itself, speaks volumes as to how things came to be. What I do know is the positions that I took, the platform that I took, that I was elected upon, is not a popular platform in this state. We know that because the prior governor, former Governor Bentley, was trying to raise $800 million to build new prisons. And I've said all along, we need to start closing the prisons we've got and do more work on this side of the Great Wall, as opposed to thinking that Department of Corrections can solve our problems in the criminal justice system. It just can't happen that way.
Attorney Charles Todd Henderson, thank you for taking this time with CSJC News.
Oh, and thank you as well for taking the time.